Welcome to Close-Up Radio, where our hosts, Doug Llewellyn and Jim Masters, bring you the amazing stories of people who answered the call to unlock their potential and taken control of their own success with authenticity, creativity, persistence, and resilience. Close-Up Radio special guests share their knowledge and wisdom so you, the listener, can live the most empowered life possible. Close-Up Radio. And now, here's today's host, Doug Llewellyn.
Well, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Nice to have you with us today. You know, it's very interesting. You just heard our opening announcer, he's a great guy, mention the term resilience. It's a term a lot of people really don't know what it means or how you go about having resilience or getting it. We're going to be talking about that today, among many other things. I think it's ironic that he just mentioned the word because I was going to mention it myself. We're happy to welcome back our executive coach and psychologist guest, Dr. Marilyn Puder-York, who has been a guest here. She was here last week at this time. She's back again with us today. She's an amazing lady. She has spent her career helping leaders to be mentally and psychologically healthy so they can manage themselves and others through challenging times. And as you all know, we are in the midst of one of those challenging times. Dr. Puder-York has helped clients navigate really catastrophic events, including 9/11. And she was very close to the action. She's based in Stamford, Connecticut, so she knows all about what that was like. She's also, of course, gone through the financial crisis and now, of course, the impact of COVID-19. It really has changed a lot of things in the business world. And talking to an executive coach who is also a psychologist has many advantages. I love hearing it. We talk to a lot of executive coaches on these shows. You know, there are coaches who can help you in every aspect of your life these days. And I pointed out before, you know, the CEO of Google admits he has a coach and confers with his coach quite frequently. And I've often said, if it's good enough for the CEO of Google, my goodness, it should be good enough for every one of us. People are very lucky to have an executive coach like Dr. Marilyn Puder-York. It's a delight to welcome her back again. She is one who focuses very heavily on resilience. And I think it's really amazing that we just heard our announcer mention that word. Dr. Marilyn Puder-York, welcome back, Dr. Marilyn. How are you? Nice to have you with us today.
Hey, thank you, Doug. Just a point. I lived in Battery Park City during 9/11, so I was right there and almost got killed that day, but I was saved by a client. So, yeah, and we moved to Connecticut after that. So, anyway, Thank you, Doug, for that nice intro. I also want to express my appreciation to all your listeners and hoping that everybody's staying well. And for those, frankly, who've gone through some significant struggles during this time, I wish them the best in recovery from these setbacks in their lives. Resiliency, I think, is a necessity of our time, resiliency and endurance, because although there have been many turbulent times in our last several years, last 20, 25 years, this one hits on almost every level. It's like you can't hide from it. I lived in Battery Park City, but you could still go up to the Upper East Side. For those who don't know New York, Upper East Side, you could go, several miles and you were away from 9/11 and were not impacted by it. But this one impacts us all, I think, on multiple levels, which creates a lot of anxiety. And I could talk a little bit about, do you want me to talk a little more about, what resiliency is really about, Doug?
It's so interesting. I've heard him do that introduction so many times, but when he mentioned the word resilience, it jumped out at me, and I thought, my gracious, we're right on target. You do focus heavily on resilience, and it's just interesting because some people don't really get the meaning of it and why it's so important. Resilience is a critical thing to have and to get.
Yeah, it is it really consists of multiple competencies. One of them clearly is self-awareness and self-management, which we can get into later, but the other really is a set of mindsets and behaviors that actually help you have the ability to rebound from adversity and keep your balance, to make the best of whatever situation we find ourselves in. Everybody's impacted by particularly this crisis differently because it hits us at different vulnerabilities, financial or job-wise, or dealing with an ill family member or someone who's passed away, unfortunately. So it hits us on different levels. But regardless of what those challenges are, there is a choice. There is a choice that we can make in truly turning our anxiety into the more positive kind, which provide us the fuel for being able to protect ourselves and others as well as our businesses. And positive anxiety encourages us to reach out to others for comfort, advice, creates communities. And positive anxiety has a bit of optimism and hopefulness to it, and not just pessimism and catastrophic thinking. And that's part of the ability to rise yourself up during these times and adapt and adjust and manage as best as you can without perfectionism, obviously. So it's a necessity.
It really is, and it's interesting. You have a wonderful website. I want to point out, and let me give your website out to everybody because they should go to refer to this. Marilyn Puder-York.com. Marilyn, everybody can spell that, Marilyn. Puder is Puder. Marilyn Puder. Am I pronouncing
Puder
it wrong?
like the metal.
It is. Okay, Puder like the metal. Good. Okay.
York.com.
Puder-York.com. If you go there and look, obviously there's all kinds of information on your career and your background and what you've done, but it points out you specialize in one-to-one organizationally sponsored coaching for executives, and you help valued executives maintain resiliency through change and upheavals and adjust behaviors to fit their work environment, and a number of other things. But that one term, maintain resiliency through change and upheavals, a lot of people are going through that right now. It's changing the way a lot of people do work, and executives for sure. Tell me a little bit about what the country is going through with this pandemic has affected you and the way you do your business. How about that?
Well, that's interesting. No, rarely I'm asked that question. That's great. First of all, and I do get organizational sponsored coaching, but I also do private coaching for those who are trying to have the same aims, but they're not sponsored by their organization. They come to me privately. I would not have anticipated, if anyone would have told me a year ago that this was going to happen, I probably would have freaked. I would have said, how am I going to go to New York, which is where I have my office and where I see a lot of my private and organizationally sponsored. And I didn't even know the word Zoom. I mean, yeah, I knew the word Zoom, but not Zoom, the visual,
right.
the seminar stuff. And but I got my tech guy because once this started and I realized that I wasn't going into the office, got myself set up, got the app, started to learn it. And I have been surprised how effective and how efficient this has been, and actually how much I'm liking it and how much my individual clients have also found it of great value. I wouldn't say the same when you're dealing with more than 3 people. In my experience on Zoom, then it gets a little more challenging to maintain the level of intimacy and direct contact. You have to be a little bit more generally focused, not hyper-focused on one person or 2 people. But I think that when you reduce the commute and you reduce the hassles of a commute, people are, at least in my experience, particularly me, more relaxed, almost more zen-like, And by the time I get to my computer and my laptop, and I start the Zoom calls, I am generally much more mellow than I would be, schlepping from, Stanford on the Metro North, the subway up to my office, where although I'm at the peak of my performance, there's a level of some fatigue, and my clients feel the same way. Plus, you have the tone. You can hear the person, and you hear their mood, or you hear their affect, and you visually can see their facial expressions. And because they're a little more relaxed, I find that some of them start sharing deeper areas of vulnerability or challenges that they're facing in a way that I would not have anticipated with some of the clients as much. It's almost a level, you're so hyper-focused on each other without the stimulation, unless you have a dog in the room or something, that you, in fact, can go deeper into the work. And I am actually pivoting, almost all of my practice on Zoom and on phone calls. But I absolutely think, and it doesn't have to be Zoom. There are other, platforms that one can use. But it's been extraordinary, and in terms of the positive impact it's had on the quality of the coaching I'm doing, and I think, all told, I think my clients are getting a very good service, even though they're not seeing me live in an office.
That's amazing to hear. That's amazing. But, conversely, as it's easier for you and you don't have the commute, on the subway and everything else, your clients don't either.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
can be either at home, where they were, or they're in their office and they consult. They don't have to go get in a cab or whatever, and come to your office. So it's easier on both sides. Right?
It is. The only challenge is, people's size of their homes or their privacy factor. Okay. And now that the weather has gotten nicer, what has happened, particularly if they have some distancing when they're outside, is some of my clients who have smaller apartments, let's say, or don't have the privacy that they'd like because there's a limited amount of privacy in their homes, go outside, assuming the weather, and we'll reschedule to find a day when the weather is going to be fine. And they go, maybe in their backyard or go to a park which is open, and sit at a bench and make sure they have their mask, and when they're talking to me, they may take their mask off unless somebody comes by. So it's not perfect, I should say, for those whose homes don't provide the level of privacy, but it is workable. It is workable.
Well, I think that's really amazing to hear that, and this really could change the shape of your practice, couldn't it? And I mean, for the years to come.
Yeah, I do, and I also think I have more access to, for people who are, in fact, on the West Coast or international. I just got a new client, a private coaching client in Europe, who heard about me, and I'm not sure it was from the radio. It was a couple of weeks ago, so it was before the first radio. And, we are communicating. We have to find the time, complementary time, but we're communicating on Zoom. And had I not had Zoom, it would not be the same, because you would at least need to see the face, the tone. You need to hear, and it's been great, So that is, hopefully that's a good answer.
I was thinking you could close your office in Manhattan maybe and do everything from Connecticut to, in the future.
That's a possibility.
Possibly.
I'm a trusted advisor to some CEOs in New York, and some of them do, if you will, it's not so much a coach as an advisor. It's a little differentiated a little differently. I'm maybe on a retainer, and they would expect my coming to their offices, but they're not in their offices now, so I am working with them on Zoom. But when the time comes, it might be some clients might want to come to an office or want me to come to their office. So, so I can't give it up entirely, but
let me ask you a question about the clients that you deal with. What are you hearing from, the majority of those you consult with who are facing the issues that have been brought on by this pandemic? I mean, they're leaders. Obviously, you deal with executives, on a daily basis almost. But a lot of these leaders are working from home. They've sent their employees. They're working from home, or they've had to lay off people. What kind of problems are you hearing from your clients? The problems that are causing them, real issues.
Okay, well, they might also have patterns of problems that were there before the COVID, and which might get exacerbated. So if there are some executives who suffer from this degree of perfectionism, wanting to be the best they can be, there are limitations to how much they can outreach or how much they can do to save who save valued employees who have to be furloughed. So there's a certain amount of sadness and frustration in the hearts and minds of some of these leaders who, because of challenges in their business, and the loss of revenue coming in and sort like that, have to make some really hard decisions, and it weighs heavily on them, especially those who strive to be the best they can be and don't particularly and care about the mental well-being and the economic viability of their workforce. So it's a very, very big burden, and my job for those of them who express that, is to really get into ways they can be the best leader in a situation like that. And they have to, and perfectionism is the enemy of being the best they can be in a situation like this, because you can't be. It's not a situation that's so binary that you can fix it with a new strategy. It's multidimensional and very, very overwhelming. So that's part of it. The other part of it is many of them are fatigued. They are not taking as good care of themselves because they're the role models. Like Cuomo is a role model, role models of great leadership, or they should be, right? It's what we need leaders for during this period of time, kind of like good parents helping their children get through a violent storm, who can assuage anxiety of kids, but in this case, employees. And we want the leaders to be strong. But if they're not managing their time well and putting priority into building their own stamina, well-being, health, and psychological health, and physical health, and exercising, eating well, sleeping well, avoiding toxic situations or people who behave in non-valued ways and in toxic ways. If you don't protect yourself, this anxiety is contagious, and despair is contagious, and ill health is contagious, not necessarily viral ill health, but negativity and pessimism and all those ugly things that can turn people into being depressed or immobilized or paralyzed by lack of strategic thinking and innovative thinking. So my job really is to encourage these leaders to, if you will, put the oxygen mask on themselves before they focus on everyone else, so that, like, when we're on airplanes, the announcements come, take care of yourself first. So they have the stamina and role modeling to be resilient during this period of time. So there's a lot on the shoulders of leaders, and the more resilient they are, and the more emotionally intelligent and self-aware they are. And that's just one thing I did talk about last week, but it bears repeating if there's new audience members, and that is one of the most important aspects of resiliency is know yourself well enough that you know your strengths, you know what situations you can handle, and where you're vulnerable, where your blind spots are, where have you been triggered, and have therefore been so overwhelmed with negative emotion that you don't think or act in an adaptive way. And if you know that in advance, and you know this crises can trigger those things, make sure you have a cabinet of trusted advisors who have different skill sets, potentially complementary, but different temperaments, and not the same kind of vulnerabilities, who can reality check you and advise you and help you through this. And that relates not just to the leaders, it also relates to all of us. I do that with my husband. He and I are very, very different. I am so results-oriented, action-based. And when this all happened, it was like, okay, what do I need to do? What do I do? What do I do? And my husband, who is much more, able to sit back, be somewhat more Zen-like, says, look, we need to get more information. Let's be patient. And, that helped my mindset, frankly, as well as my behavior. We also want to be focused on realistic optimism, for Doug, for all of us, and that is, you know what the truth is, and you know that the facts are out there, and this is a challenge, and we don't really know when it's going to be over or what it's going to look like. But I think you can maintain a level of hopefulness. And when you feel a level of hopefulness and you feel that there are some actions you can take to create better circumstances for yourself and others, you do increase your resiliency and your ability to cope.
That's very interesting. I have a question I'm really busting to ask you. I talk to a lot of executive coaches. Mm-hmm. You're somewhat different because mm-hmm. you really began as a clinical psychologist and then became an executive coach. What do you think your background as a clinical psychologist does to help you in your role as an executive coach? What makes you a little different? You do have different qualities that most coaches don't have.
But if they haven't had the training, and some of them probably have the intuition. Even there, I've met some good coaches who don't have my credentials because they're enormously gifted with great intuition and great emotional intelligence. I would say that in my training and in my doing my private practice before I got into the corporate environment at a global bank where I ran their employee assistance program and started really getting seduced by the idea of coaching as opposed to doing therapy. My training was really to help people understand that whatever childhood experiences they had created some patterns of thought and behaviors and emotions that may have fit the situation when you're 5 or 10, but when they're 35 or 40 or 25, no longer are adaptive. And so my job, analytically, was to support their growth and their self-awareness in understanding what's adaptive and what's not adaptive in their life based on their goals. And I brought that with me into coaching. So even though the coaching is very results-oriented, which also fits with my temperament, and directive in the sense that I'm actually giving specific advice as to the type of communications, how to manage difficult people, which may not really be based in my being a psychologist. But everyone comes into adulthood with vulnerabilities. Everybody comes in with blind spots. And the ability to have that training and to be able to understand what's therapy and what's coaching, probe it, identify it, but it's not my job to heal them over years in therapy. It is my job to make them conscious and aware of what they are so that they do not cause leadership behavior that is destructive, non-adaptive, politically incorrect, and emotionally dumb. So that they can be honest, they can be empathetic, and they can be straightforward and create clarity for people, even though they may be having themselves an anxiety attack. I can, and they may be triggered, I can help them transcend that through their awareness and behave in a manner that is as ideal as possible for every circumstance. So, as I said, I think my psychological background allows me to kind of hybrid the counseling and the coaching together to achieve a really satisfactory result. But I don't see myself healing people because I think the healing aspect of treatment is a longer-term process and is a deeper process and potentially more of an emotional bonding process with the therapist. Mm-hmm. And I know what it is and I know what it isn't, and I don't do therapy when I am coaching. I use my skills, but I don't see myself as a therapist. I see myself as a coach, where we have specific outcomes in mind and specific goals in mind in terms of strengthening the person's ability to be resilient and be a capable person, and whether it's a good parent or, I'm coaching someone on their parenting skills or how to be the best leader they can be. Hope that answers it for you.
Do you get into that with some of your clients, coaching them on their parenting skills? If they're a CEO who's come to you for issues in the office, in the
yeah,
the business
because
world?
Some of the same blind spots in terms of their frustration with people who are not as smart as them it can manifest in their kids not necessarily performing at a level that they would expect. And then there's frustration because these guys and gals who reach this level of power, I mean good power, I mean political power, but power, really have very, very high expectations of their performance, and they have very high expectations of other people's performance. And not everybody has their capacity level, but they assume everybody does, and they want everybody, including their kids. And some of them segue into, geez, I'm doing this with John. No wonder my son really and I get into fights all the time, and he feels that I'm constantly being dismissive and disrespectful based on, what his goals are. And, it's a great conversation because it's a blind spot for this CEO, let's say, or this executive, in that he or she is transferring his or her expectations onto everyone that they're around. They want everyone to be like themselves. Not everybody has the capacity level.
That's for sure. It's interesting. Do you find most clients come to you on their own seeking help because they know they need help? Or are some of them, and I'm sure this probably is the case, they're assigned to come to you for help, someone above them?
Yeah.
You need help, right?
Yeah, there are some leaders who voluntarily know about me. I may have worked with, people that they know, and come to me and pay it out of their budget. And there are other people, we're talking about the organizationally sponsored, and then other people who, depending upon the problem, sometimes I see people with severe behavioral problems at work, like the perfectionist who gets very bullying-like with their staff, or abusive, not necessarily sexually, but or verbally when they're frustrated. Those people get referred to me because the impact of their less than effective behavior is impacting retention of talented people, or the morale of the workforce that they're managing. And they get referred to me, usually by the chief people officer or the head of HR, who identifies it as a talent issue and potentially a grievance issue that I have to address. But it's a mix. They can either come on their own. In the private side, it's always coming on their own. They've heard about me, but they're paying directly, so there's really no organizational sponsorship.
Typically, one other question. How long do you find you typically work with a client?
Which kind, private or corporate?
Private.
Corporate sets boundaries on time because corporate is paying organizationally.
Right.
They're paying for the fee.
Right.
So they will set a certain time frame. I've had CEOs who have retained me for a few years because they're paying out of their budget. They have the discretion, they have the power and the discretionary budget to do that. A little bit further down the food chain here, usually it's 3 months, maybe 6 months, and at that point maybe an extension, but the average I'd say would be 6 months working with someone. The more difficult the person, but the more valued the person, it could go longer. But that's about what it kind of looks like. Yeah. And private, it depends on the person. Nobody's mandating. It depends upon what their goal is, and it could be a few visits. It's not therapy. It's not like they have to talk to me every week for the next 2 years,
I wish we had more time. We've gone through a half hour. You love what you do. It's just obvious, don't you?
Yeah, it's a passion.
It is a passion. I can tell. You can hear it in your voice. Folks, we've been talking to Dr. Marilyn Puder-York. She's based in Stamford, Connecticut right now. She's at home doing her work.
Zoom.
It's just been delightful talking to you, Dr. Marilyn. Marilyn Puder-York, York.com. That's her website, MarilynPuder-York.com. Dr. Marilyn, I hope we can talk again. This has really been very interesting. You're an amazing lady, and thank you so much for your time. Okay?
As are you, a great interviewer, and stay well and stay safe.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to a broadcast from Close Up Radio, a division of Close Up Television Incorporated. For more information about our show and to be considered for future broadcasts, please visit closeuptelevision.com. You may also learn about us on social media and listen to us on podcast and internet radio. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you have an empowered and productive day.
We sure do, everybody. I'm Doug Llewellyn. Thanks for being with us. See you next time. Till then, take care. Bye for now.